Hello everyone, bringing you a video today looking at an Australian canteen cover. So this is a piece of Australian web equipment. It's a further development of the Australian modified M1956 canteen carrier, which had been introduced during the course of the Vietnam War. Australia, of course, adopted the US M1956 equipment and then set about adapting it for its own needs and producing its own version of it. And this is a further development of that equipment, in use right the way through until the introduction of Australia's M1988 equipment in the late 1980s. So we're going to have a look at this in some detail in the video. As a quick introduction to this, we're going to have a look at these two canteen covers which inspired the design, or led up to the design of the Australian post-Vietnam War canteen cover. What we have on the left here is the US M1956 cover, and on the right the Australian modified M1956 cover, which was introduced during the course of the Vietnam War. From the front they're very similar, as you can see. This is a first pattern US cover, so it has cotton trim around the edge here, whereas the Australians went for a nylon trim from the start. You can see there's a nylon herringbone tape used there as the binding tape around the edge of the flaps there. If we look at the back, the major difference can be seen here in that the Australians reintroduced M1910 hanger hooks, which had been used on previous US canteen covers. The M1956 equipment in US service, there was an intention to move away from having things slung under the belt. Hence you just have slide keepers which hold the cover close and tight to the belt. They are retained and fit in exactly the same way on the Australian cover, but you then have the option of hanging it below the belt using the M1910 hanger hooks, which you have here. Looking at these with the canteens removed, we can see inside here they're both lined with a wool material, a bit like carpet underlay, I suppose you could say. It's a rough wool felt, you can perhaps see in there, and then a dark olive green variant on the Australian cover there, but still this coarse wool felt. It's lined front and back with that. So that's the US and Australian M1956 canteen covers. We'll look now at the one we want to discuss in detail in this video, which is that introduced during the 1970s and the post-Vietnam War years, and then used right the way through into the introduction of Australian M1988 equipment. And we'll move on now to talk about the post-Vietnam modification to the Australian canteen cover. This was introduced in the 1970s, and it simplifies construction in having no vertical stitching down the front. As you can see, it's just a plain front there. You've lost that stitching down the front of the cover. An additional feature from those we looked at previously, you don't find this on the US or the Australian covers predating these, is the eyelets across the bottom. 3 eyelets to allow for drainage, obviously, allow water to drain out of the pouch. And then on the back here, in addition to the fittings we've already looked at, which includes the slide keepers here, obviously stitched on, or attached using a piece of webbing stitched on across the back here, and the M1910 style hanger hooks across the top there, obviously using a stronger section of thicker web material to attach those on there. So slight improvement to the design in that regard. We also have belt loops as well, so there's an additional feature there. The webbing strip that attaches the slide keepers has been extended slightly, and that's been used to attach these belt loops on each side. There's no date visible on this, unfortunately. The stamp has completely worn away on the back here, but these tend to turn up with 70s dates. And they were used right the way through until the introduction of the M1988 equipment in the latter 1980s. We'll remove the canteen now and we'll have a quick look at the interior. So with the canteen removed, we'll just have a look in here. You can see that thick felt lining again in this dark olive drab colour. The eyelets through the bottom there, as you can see. Still closing with the cover, obviously still closing with snaps or press studs, and then you've got this nylon binding. The materials used are basically the same, say, other than the obviously thicker webbing being used to attach the M1910 hanger hooks at the back there. So that is the post-Vietnam canteen cover. Here we have a lineup of all 3 of them. We have the initial US M1956 design, the modified Australian example used during the Vietnam War, and then finally the post-war modification at the end here with its simplified construction. So there we are. I do find it particularly interesting when countries take pre-existing designs of kit and equipment and adapt them somewhat for their own purposes, and obviously that's what's happened here. Hopefully you found it interesting looking at this as well. If you have and you'd like to see more from the channel, please do consider subscribing if you haven't already. And whether you're newly subscribing or you've previously subscribed, please make sure you hit the little bell, the notification button down below. That will of course alert you when I upload future videos. If you really like my uploads and you would like to support the channel, you can. Both Patreon and PayPal are linked down below, And as ever, a massive thank you to everybody who supports the channel using those two methods. It's greatly appreciated, as I always say. Thank you all very much indeed. If you'd like to follow the channel on social media, you can. Facebook, Instagram and Twitter are all linked down below. And if you'd like to get in touch but you don't really use social media, there is of course an email address down there as well. That's everything for this video. So until next time, bye for now.